Emily's going to help with the technical part to take you on this sort of guided tour of the website as I tell you about what are some of the ways that people can get involved with Braver Angels. What are some of the things that we do in a little bit more detail? So the first thing is Braver Angels debates. And Braver Angels debates can approach divisive topics like abortion, voter fraud versus voter suppression, vaccine mandates, but with the goal not of determining a winner or loser, but rather a goal for both sides to reach greater understanding of where the other side is coming from. And in fact, we'll tell you later about a debate that's coming up next week, but also many of the past debates are available on Braver Angels YouTube channel. And I've been participating live with several of them, and there's some pretty interesting content on both sides. Even Lou's saying things that, I didn't think of that. Anyway, that's one thing. Second thing is to join an alliance. So the Central Eastern Washington Alliance, which is the one that we're in, formed about a year ago. And later on, we will post you a link if you're interested in getting on the mailing list. And I think Emily mentioned that she's one of the co-chairs of our alliance. And going back to something that was mentioned in the video, at every level of organization, Braver Angels keeps the leadership balanced between reds and blues. So our alliance has 3 blue co-chairs and 3 red co-chairs. The next thing you can do is take a skills training, and there's several different skills workshops: depolarizing within, skills for bridging the divide, families and politics, skills for social media, and some newer ones that have to do with like being blue in a red environment, being red in a blue environment, depolarizing conversations about race. New workshops are getting developed all the time. But what they have in common is that they're teaching specific skills for how to have a conversation that stays respectful and stays productive instead of triggering defensiveness and resistance and just blowing up. So that's the next, that's skills trainings. The next category is workshops. And you've already heard about red-blue workshops and the concept that they bring a small group of conservatives and an equal number of liberals together. And there's a very structured process in which they sort of identify stereotypes that they think the other side has about them and deconstruct, is there some truth to that? Why do they have that stereotype? What else would you like them to know about the reality so they're no longer seeing you through the lens of that stereotype, and sharing and exchanging, and everybody grows. There's something called a common ground single issue workshop, in which, again, an equal number of reds and blues come together, in this case, generally from one geographic area, unlike all of these others, which can be done by Zoom remotely from anywhere. And I failed to mention that a couple of the workshops are also available as a self-study exercise. But the advantage of doing them as a group is that the workshops all involve breakout sessions where you've just learned a skill, now practice it with one or more partners. And I think most people find that really, really useful. In any case, so red-blue workshops, common ground workshops, in which the goal is to figure out what both sides agree about, but then also to take that back into the real world to make some positive change in the community. So an example is I helped with a common ground on what should we teach about race, or how should we teach race in the schools. And there was like way more points of agreement than not. And then like a plan to share those conclusions with the local school board and stuff like that. So they're a real sort of, as opposed to the skills workshops, which are more working on your own tools, common ground is like, then go help change the world to make it better. And then one-on-one conversations, and I'm going to turn it over to Emily to tell more about that, because she's done that and I haven't.
All right, so as Liz said, most of these things can happen or have been happening in a virtual landscape. We do also offer in-person workshops. So later we're going to talk about if we want to do some kind of more formal partnership with the league, but we could, for example, offer a red-blue in Kittitas County. and there would be people who could come and help us moderate and facilitate that live. But the one-on-one conversations have certainly been happening over Zoom, and they are very deliberate in terms of a pairing that might seem to be in opposition. So a logical one is a red and a blue. I participated in one that was rural and urban. And then there's also black and white. And so because this comes from, again, a marriage counseling kind of philosophy, there's a very structured way that you go through. So I ended up talking to somebody who actually lived in Atlanta, and she and I followed the discussion guide and had a really lovely time having a conversation. In fact, one of the outcomes was her son wanted to be a park ranger. And so we set up a separate time later for me to talk with him. I know another co-chair was involved in a red-blue, and he and his partner have continued to meet on a monthly basis. So all of these things are free. And that's one of the things, some of them do, let me take that back. Some of them do require that you be a member of Braver Angels, but it costs $12 a year. So for $1 a month to get participated, but then everything else is being facilitated by volunteers. So Liz talked about how she's been running meetings. I've been running meetings as well as people who are running the technology. We have folks who are trained as moderators, but it was really powerful. And not surprisingly, if I wanted to sign up for a black-white one-on-one, I had to wait like a year because the waiting list was so long. But I was able to find someone pretty quickly to talk to from a rural urban kind of environment. And that's all paired at the national office.
All right, back to me. So another kind of thing that Braver Angels is just gearing up to put into reality is called Braver Politics. And that's looking to, on the national level, engage legislators or staff of legislators in red-blue workshops, in skills trainings for candidates, so that they can learn how to communicate about political issues with elected officials and constituents in a clear and depolarizing way. And part of what makes me feel like we're not just spitting in the wind, like maybe Braver Angels really can make a difference in the world, is the fact that, well, for one thing, in this past year, I learned about the House Select Committee for Modernization of Congress, which is a long name, but basically it's a group that's trying to come up with a whole bunch of different proposals, both to make life better for Congress people, but also to try to reduce the gridlock and get things functioning better. And that itself was structured in a very, very bipartisan way. And the staff of the Republican chair and the Democratic chair have had red-blue workshop together. I mean, like, some of this stuff is already happening. So the hope is that as this gets geared up, there can be one-to-one red-blue conversations for members of Congress or state legislators, but they'd be different from what Emily went through, in that there'd be a Braver Angels moderator helping them to make things happen in a productive and respectful way. So that is something that I really hope that with League of Women Voters in the long run, we can do something with locally. But frankly, the puzzle in my own mind is, I don't know the Reds in the county. I mean, it would have to be big involvement of a partner organization in terms of how do you do local implementation. And similarly, I mean, I would love to, whether it's or not, it's explicitly through Braver Politics and explicitly aimed at those local Democrats and Republicans who are in office, but to be able to hold red-blue workshops, especially as time goes on in the pandemic and we're able to have things in person. So I'm going to turn it back to Emily to talk a little bit more about our alliance.
All right, so certainly you can see that really the goal, and Liz already mentioned this, really the goal is all about that you find out that you have more in common than you think. And that is certainly something I'll be honest, when I went to the Red Blue workshop in Seattle, so this was pre-pandemic, and one of the things I was an observer, so that I couldn't participate, there was too much interest. And I said, you know what, I'm just gonna go be a fly on the wall in the Reds group because I just don't understand. And so as Liz talked about, they went through this whole, like one of the activities is Reds get together, Blues get together, and it's stereotypes. I'm not gonna lie. I'm reading through, they're listing all the stereotypes. And in the background in the room, I'm like, but you are those things, is what I was feeling. Like, yeah, those aren't stereotypes, those are true. 2 years later, I went to the Red Blue as a participant. And I ended up actually in a one-on-one pairing that's, again, part of that workshop with the Red. And the biggest thing I took away, I mean, she and I are now Facebook friends and we're connecting on a bunch of different things, was that ultimately we all wanted a better America. We just had different ideas about how that might happen. And the thing that was the most fascinating to me is when you list, again, with the Red Blue, what are the most pressing issues in America? And you put Reds and Blues in separate rooms, they come back and they're the same issues. So that's one of the things that I really have taken away as a participant, and also why I'm so heavily involved in the Alliance, is that I just keep coming back to, man, we have more in common. And this is another human who thinks differently than me, and really gives a personalization to who these folks are. So aside from the workshop development, the other place that I've really developed some pretty remarkable friendships and relationships, although to be honest, I've only met one person except for Liz in person. Everyone else, I've only seen this much of them. And so I look forward to the day that I finally get to meet them in person, but is through our alliance. So as I mentioned, when I first found out about Better Angels in 2018, there was a group that was talking in Spokane. And at one time I remember saying to myself, am I really gonna drive from Ellensburg to Spokane to have coffee, to turn around and drive back? Fortunately, we don't have to ask that question anymore because now we meet via Zoom. And so, you know, we're familiar with this breakdown of the state. We're basically everything east of the Cascades or east of the crest of the Cascades. So we've got individuals who are in the Tri-Cities. We have people that live in Spokane. We have individuals in Winthrop. We've got people in Othello. So we're all across the state. And as Liz mentioned earlier, we're in equal leadership. So even on this slide, we have like these two folks identify as red. So does Mike. Shane's blue, I'm blue, Yvonne's blue, Deidre's independent. And so one of the things that we do, which is a little bit different than other alliances, is a lot of alliances, they exist simply to host the workshops that Liz just talked about. We do that too, but we have 2 meetings a month, and 1 meeting a month, like tonight, is just purely meant to have us either grow our skills or get to know each other even better. So we're sort of paving the way. I mean, what I'm hearing from the state coordinators, certainly in the Pacific Northwest, is we're a little bit odd in a good way about what we're doing. Like, for example, Liz did a session coming from her background as a doctor on healthcare. And then we call those questions of curiosity. So someone gives a presentation and then we all get an opportunity to ask them questions. I've hosted discussions using another organization called Living Room Conversations, and we've had conversations around gun control, for example. So we're building our skills. We do that once a month, and then once a month we're having a meeting that's more specific to a debate we're planning or a skills workshop that we're planning. And so it's kind of fun to get to see the different things that we've been doing. We've listened to a podcast and come back and had conversations about it. So there's a bunch of different things, and the co-chairs are all sharing the leadership. So if a blue person, the blue co-chair is a chair 1 month, then a red person is the co-chair of that discussion the next month. Laura, can I call on you unsolicited to share a little bit? You're one of our members who come regularly. Do you have any thoughts that you might share about what it's been like to be involved?
I really like it because I do like the idea of trying to keep the conversation going. I don't like cutting people out. I have been through the depolarizing within workshop. I really like that because the thing you walk away from it, in my opinion, is to remember they are not all alike any more than we are all alike. And you can define the they however you want and the we however you want. But the idea being, it's just and the media doesn't happen, which makes me think I hope that Liz is going to talk a little bit about her media thing that she's got going, because that sounds very exciting going forward. But I just enjoy getting to practice skills because we've gotten so vitriolic, let's put it this way, in our society. And I also like it. It has a lot in common with League in that when we do a candidates night, it's very scripted. The probability of people getting out of control into a screaming match is really going to be difficult to do. Braver Angels is the same thing, but first there you have the group coming together as well-meaning people. But we all know as well-meaning people, we're discussing volatile issues. And I went to a workshop on Saturday, and Saturday we actually put blues together and reds together so that everybody could practice on each other. So as accidents happen, as they will, since we're all usually leaping to the stereotype or the what we see as a logical conclusion of a thought thread, we're doing it with each other that are like-minded, so that we are practicing all the time to try to remain, virtuous in civil discourse, which is what I hope to achieve someday. So it's always practicing. So thanks for asking, Emily.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention before we move on that I have put the link in chat to how to get on the mailing list for our Central and Eastern Washington Alliance. Okay, back to you, Emily.
No, thank you. And I guess I would just riff quickly on what Laura just said. It's a battle. I have facilitated, I've run the technology for, my gosh, probably 15 workshops. I've been a co-chair for over a year. And yet when I was a red blue participant and I was having a conversation with actually someone who's in our alliance as a red, and she said to me, well, Emily, it's just because of the type of media that you are taking in. I went to the immediate defense. And I was like, hey, hold on a minute. And the moderator stepped in and said, I just want to remind everyone, we're not here to have a debate. And I started laughing and I said, I knew the moderator was like, oh my gosh, how many of these have I been to? So it is a practicing set of skills. So aside from Laura and Liz, we actually at our last Alliance meeting, I just ran a quick poll and I asked for some folks to offer why they're involved. And so I'm just going to share a couple of quotes from people because I think they're really fun and they're right local. They're people in our part of the state. So here's somebody who said, it's like therapy. It gives them an opportunity to remember the humanity in those.